When I was filling out the application for the Wendy's High School Heisman Award, I didn't really know that much would come.
It's teamwork. You communicate with...
What that involves is making sure I communicate and coordinate with each of the guidance departments.
We're building a ramp for someone who really
Don't
can't
give up just because it's hard, because I had a lot of times where I thought I wasn't going to make it.
Hi, and welcome to Hometown Heroes. I'm your host. We are fortunate to be doing another reunion show. And with us today, we have Cynthia Chambers. Welcome, Cynthia.
Hi, thank you for having me.
So it's been a little bit of time since we have seen each other. Why don't you tell me a little bit what's been going on in your life these days?
Absolutely. So I'm working as an engineer here in Seattle, Washington, so a little ways away from home now. But I've been up here for the past couple of years working in the pharmaceutical industry. So thankfully, even though, things have been a little bit different for the past year and a half, thankfully things have been pretty steady over this way.
Great. I was actually out in Portland about a month ago for a conference, first time to the Northwest. So you've been there a couple of years. It's definitely different than Salisbury, and Seattle is different than Portland too. So tell me a little bit about what that experience has been transitioning to the West Coast and that lifestyle up there compared to, I guess, like a Salisbury.
So it's definitely something to get used to. It is, well, first of all, we're 3 hours behind. So getting used to that kind of, small scale jet lag was definitely different. Just getting used to how things are here. Things seem to be a lot more relaxed, but it's still bustling big city. So it's been interesting kind of having that juxtaposition. And I actually live near downtown. So, having that extra layer has been definitely something interesting. This is the first time that I'm living right in a major city. So it's definitely a lot different than how Salisbury is. Salisbury, from what I remember, it's a lot more slow paced. There's not as many people. So it's definitely something to get used to, but it's nice up here.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. When I was in Portland, our main keynote the first night was the police chief of Seattle during the big riots and the big occupation scenario. Had you made it to was that like right when you got into Seattle? Was that a little bit before your time?
So I moved up here late 2019. So it was a little bit before everything kind of exploded. And actually at the time I was living in the Ballard area, which is like 15 minutes up the road from where I am now. And so I wasn't really in the area where the major, uprisings were taking place, thankfully. But it definitely was an interesting experience, just, being that close, but not being directly in it. But, thankfully things have been okay. Just trying to keep things as close to normal as you can with the way things have gone, worldwide these days.
Well, we may circle back to some more of that as we unfold in our conversation, but let's talk about the career. So engineering and pharmaceuticals. Tell us kind of what you do and how you got pulled into that.
So I've been working in pharma on and off for the past about 8 years or so. It's been the bulk of my experience. There were a couple years where I was working with, chemical, specialty, food, beverage, but for the most part, my working experience has been in pharma. Starting off, in manufacturing, just working with equipment, to working on testing and troubleshooting, making documentation, things like that. So I'm actually starting a new role on Monday, so it's going to be a little bit different. But even in my current role, I am, helping troubleshoot equipment, try to figure out, ways to, for example, store particular chemicals that we use for our process, trying to figure out, how to implement new processes and new technologies and things like that. So it's definitely been interesting kind of seeing the other side of pharma. It's definitely something that is a lot more technical, which is something I love. It's just, I've always kind of gravitated to more technical subjects, and even my schooling was in engineering, so it kind of worked out very well. But in terms of getting into the industry, it worked out, getting in initially right out of college. I was working at the time at a help desk at the Johns Hopkins Nursing School. So, from there, working at GlaxoSmithKline as a manufacturing associate, and then it's kind of just taken off from there. So it's definitely been an interesting journey, and things have kind of taken different turns that I wasn't quite expecting. But in every role that I've had, I've been able to learn a lot. So I've been really, really grateful for that experience.
That's awesome. We'll talk a little bit more about some of that stuff, that experience. But let's start kind of at the beginning of your journey, because I don't think we've talked since you were on your way to college, in undergraduate, and then going to engineering. If we can rewind the clock a little bit to those college days, and what that experience was, going out on your own, taking on the world, and then how that kind of got you set up for your professional life.
So it was one of those things that I thought I was prepared, and then I got there and realized I didn't know, I didn't know what I was doing. Thankfully, I have a good support system, my parents, my brother, my friends. So I've had those supports in place, and that helped mitigate a lot of issues. But in reality, I thought I knew what I wanted when I moved out. I went to college at 17, and, I got there, and it's a completely different experience. And, not having my parents right there to kind of help avoid some of the bigger pitfalls, I kind of had to just figure it out. And, of course you can always call home, but it's a little different having to try to call home versus, being there and having people, right around the corner or in the house with you. So it was definitely an adjustment. Having to budget, paying rent, that's, things that like now they're not a big deal to me, right? Because I've had to do them for a while, but you're a teenager, you're just getting out of high school, you're not really thinking about those kinds of things. And so it was, thankfully I didn't have too bad of an experience, but it definitely was something I had to kind of get used to and kind of adjust to fairly quickly. But I'm grateful for the experiences that I did have, because, I learned a lot about myself. I was able to kind of get a good understanding of how the world actually works. And then from there, when I was able to get into that professional experience, when I graduated from college, I didn't have as big of an adjustment to make at that point, right? So by the time I graduated, I'd already been, doing many of the major adult things for a while. So it was pretty easy. The only thing to adjust to was not having to go to class, right? So it was definitely a good experience, but there are some things, if I could go back, that I definitely would do differently. But hindsight's always 20.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting. You've been out for a while, and that hindsight is 2020, and you learn a lot about like how strong you are as a person once you become independent, or just like you're a little bit more resilient than you thought you might have been. But you do, and it is nice. Like, I can't wait to move out, and then you're out. You're like, yeah, mom, dad, I can't. What's for dinner? Like, it's just right. So it is interesting fending for yourself that first time, but after a while of doing it, you realize you can do it, and it's kind of exciting to then be able to do it on your own. It is interesting though, that first day of college or that first time you step out, and you're to a certain degree stepping out for the first time again on Monday in a new work profession, a new environment, I assume, new people, new structure. I guess, in a sense, what have you learned in these different transitions in your life, taking on a new challenge with a new group of people, a new setting that you've learned about yourself or learned about the process that'll help you be successful?
So the biggest thing is that if you're not nervous, it's a bad thing, and that's something that it's a fairly recent revelation. Before you think, oh, I'm so nervous, you get those first day butterflies and, oh, this is going to be so hard and all of that. And it's like, that's good. that means that it's a challenge. That means that it's something that will force you to grow a little bit. It's something that'll get you out of your comfort zone. It's something that will have an effect on you rather than, oh, this is just status quo and I'm just, just it's another day. So I am not afraid of the nerves anymore. And that's something that I know it definitely helps. And it also is, this isn't my first rodeo doing this. This isn't the first time I've had to go to a new role, even in this industry. So there's some things that I already kind of know to expect just because, same industry, you're going to have some standards, but it's going to be interesting to see what is different. So, the processes are going to be different because it's a different company. They handle things differently. Their documentation is going to look different. Their workflows are going to be different because they have a particular process for how they do things. It's coming from a place of, I want to learn what they're doing rather than, I'm trying to keep doing what I've been doing. So that definitely helps.
What are you looking forward to? What gets you excited? I know there's the nerve side of it. There's also like new adventure, new excitement, new opportunity.
Well, it's going to be interesting because some of the folks that I'll be working with, I've actually worked with in other companies before. So it's not going to be a completely new set of folks, which it's good to have rapport with some people already, but also it's exciting to see, what new relationships can form, new developments with people, just being able to kind of see what's going to happen rather than being just flat out afraid of it. So it's nice to kind of have that balance. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it definitely makes sense. I was fortunate enough, I had a couple of different jobs, but only had two. I did AmeriCorps for a year right out of school. So if you count that, 3 jumps in my 16-year career. But every transition, a new group of people, new role, new expectations. So it is good, that excitement and that balance of nervousness. So because it has a lot of emotions with that. But I've always been in Salisbury for my life. So I have never had to other than school, not fend for myself in a new environment and, meet new coworkers and new people. I was always able to kind of maintain that same common language. I know what they're talking about because I've been here and I know the places. So going back to college again, did you go to school thinking you're going to be an engineer? Did you want to be an engineer? Did you fall into this arena along the way? How'd that all come about?
So initially, I wanted to be a chemist, and that was, all through grade school, that was what I wanted for the longest time. And actually, one of my uncles kind of spawned that love for me of chemistry. And so, I got to, I want to say like senior year of high school, and it's like, well, I don't want to just be in a lab with test tubes all day. I want to be able to apply what I'm learning and be able to, see the effects and the final result of the experiments that I run. So, it's like, well, engineering would probably be a better fit because, yes, it's chemistry, but it's applied chemistry. It's you're seeing, put in motion with equipment and things like that. And so that's what kind of brought me to deciding on chemical engineering being my major. Now, during college, there were a couple jumps that I made, and I somewhat regret it a little bit, only because I didn't think when I graduated that I was going to stick with engineering. And I'll be honest about that. I have always had a love of cooking, and so at one point I thought I was going to go off to become a chef. That's not what happened. And life kind of has a way of circling you back to the thing that you love, or at least giving you an opportunity, at least in my case, of bringing me back to that first love. And so I kind of wish that I had just stuck with it rather than, but obviously everybody has that point where they're exploring, they're trying to figure out different things. And so, I'm glad that I had that experience because it did kind of solidify that wasn't really the path that I wanted, even though I thought I did. But there are some things that I wish that I could have just, stayed the course in engineering and been able to knock out sooner. So now at 30, I'm not having to try to kind of backtrack a little bit.
I'll look for you on Top Chef here in a couple of years, and just in case that. But Well, let's sidestep a little bit away from the academic side of and the education side of it, more the personal side of it. And we tapped a little bit into the Seattle scene a little bit, but also being someone that's younger, that definitely had a youth voice, someone that stood out on the show before, as somebody who wanted to be active in her community. You know, Seattle is big, but it also there's a lot of people who are very active in that, and you're in a very active community. And when people think about people who want to take a stand, or use the word progressive or very liberal, Seattle is a place that people think about as a place to go. I know you're kind of new to the area, relatively new. Do you see yourself finding a foothold in any sort of community, agency or organization, or people that you're running into? Do you like that environment? Do you like the space?
I do. I like the environment here. I like the community here. But admittedly, because of COVID, right when I was about to start, trying to venture out and seeing what opportunities are there, everything kind of shut down. And we're still in a very limited, a limited capacity at the moment. But my hope is, as things open back up and as things get safer to, venture out again, that, I'll be able to find places to volunteer, things like that. In addition to the work that I'm doing in the role that's coming up. So that is definitely something on my mind and on my radar, but it's a matter of timing right now. So it's a little bit more finicky than I guess it normally would be.
Yeah, it's really interesting because, chatting with a couple different people throughout this process, and just in general, who either were just entering the school or just exiting school, or in your case, entering a new world. It's got to be tough because you're like hitting the reset button, but you don't actually get to really reset because you have this slow opening and exposure to anything. So I wouldn't say it's lonely, but it can be because you can't do anything or meet people. You're kind of stuck in isolation. Me being somebody who likes people and likes adventure and likes new things, to be like, oh, I can't leave the house. What's challenging, right? The last couple of years. What else did you learn about yourself over these past couple of years that you may not have known?
Well, admittedly, I'm more introverted, so being inside isn't really that bad for me. I know not everybody's felt that way. It's definitely, I'm kind of lucky in that regard, but even with that, there's so many ways to connect to people now that I haven't necessarily been missing out by not being able to, go out and go hang out after work or things like that. Like I don't really necessarily feel that I'm missing anything in that regard. In terms of things that I've learned about myself in the past couple of years, I mean, just that I have more strength than I think I do. And I have to kind of give myself a little more credit. It's hard moving, up the street from where you've been. I've moved, twice in the span of, I want to say 36 months. And those moves, I moved to Illinois before I came here. So it wasn't, a straight shot from Maryland here, but that's still very difficult. Going away from everything I've known, going away from all of, my friends, my family, like having to kind of separate and kind of figure it out because I don't have that safety net right next to me anymore, right? So, it's scary, it's daunting, but it's one of the best things that I ever could have done for myself because number one, my worldview is a lot bigger now that, I've experienced other places, but also, if I have to rebuild, I know how to now. I can start from, I have my cat and, my books and a few things of clothes, and I can build a life and be okay. And that's something that I might not have really known about myself if I hadn't taken that leap.
Right. So Illinois wasn't far enough, so you had to just keep going across the country. Now I understand.
Admittedly, both of those moves were for work. So I got a job with a small gene therapy company up in Northern Illinois. And so I moved out for that. And a couple of years later, another job later, I was a consultant for a small pharmaceutical company, or not small, but a pharmaceutical company up in Bothell, Washington, which is about half an hour north from me. And that's what brought brought me out here. And actually, my boyfriend's here living with me as well. So at this time, at least, I didn't have to be completely by myself. Right. But even then, it's still, you're trying to pick up your entire life. Right. And in my case, for this move, picking up another person's life too. And we're both trying to make it work out here. So it's definitely been interesting for sure.
Yeah, I was going to ask, it's nice that you've got another companion to kind of make the moves with too. But I also know along the journey and knowing your mom specifically pretty closely, you've had those support systems in place that were there that you could rely on along the way. I'm assuming you've stayed in touch and used them when you could. Have there been other people kind of along the way, including your parents, I'm talking about, that have helped you just with these transitions and with this, like growing up in a sense, that you've been able to rely on? And what's it been like to have those people in your corner?
So it's meant the world. I don't know that I necessarily would have made as smooth of a transition without it, to be honest. Being able to ask my parents questions, being able to, just know that if worst case things don't work out, I have somewhere to go. That's something that not everybody has, and I'm lucky to be able to say that I actually have that. My parents have been some of my biggest supporters, and my brother as well. And, I love them for it, honestly. And the feeling's mutual, right? So even when they're dealing with things, like they can still call me and we have those interactions. And so we try to make it as reciprocal as we can. But it's something that I don't think this would have worked out as well as it has if I didn't have at least a few people that I knew were rooting for me, even if I wasn't talking to them daily. So, that's something that, whether that's family, whether it's friends, whether it's coworkers, like just having those people that, are actually rooting for you, it's crucial. And especially if you're going to be making a big life decision, it's nice to know that you're not having to make it completely in a vacuum.
And, speaking of that kind of that big life decision, last time we chatted, it was almost a decade ago. I'd have to pull out the calendar. But we were little kids at that time. No, but it's what's interesting is, fast forward like 5 years from now, what's your life look like? Do you ever think about that? Like, what's your goals of what you want to accomplish? What are the next steps? You're always kind of looking forward. I know you're just getting grounded right now, but like always looking forward a little bit.
You know what? It's interesting because for the longest time, I tried to plan out, 5-10 years in advance. And something that I've really had to come to terms with, especially in this past year, is your best laid plans will likely not happen the way that you think they will. I planned so many things out and thought that things were going to look so different. I didn't even think that I was going to be here 5 years ago. And I can be honest about that. I hadn't really thought about Seattle, of all places, going that far away from home. It just hadn't really occurred to me, but 5 years later, here I am. So I have general goals that I would like to reach, but I'm no longer attaching deadlines to them, because the reality is things could happen. Big things could happen 6 months from now, even. I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know what exactly the future is going to be. And so focusing on, well, I got to achieve this by this date and this by this date and this at this time and this by this age, all it does when that doesn't happen is make you crazy. It makes you, doubt yourself. It's like, well, I thought I was going to have this, and, well, my peers are at this age and they're doing this, and it's not worth it. It's not worth the comparison, even to yourself. And I now am giving myself the grace to be human, to be an adult, to be just just be a person. And as things happen, I roll with the punches, and that makes things a lot simpler, because it also doesn't lead me to being disappointed when something doesn't go the way that I wanted exactly when I wanted to.
Yeah, sometimes over planning doesn't get you to any place because you're in the planning stage, and like sometimes you got to just get going. Cynthia, we've only got like 2 minutes left. I wanted to kind of open it up since you've been with us this whole time. Is there any other closing thoughts or comments you wanted to make? This is Hometown Heroes, so it can be anything about self-exploration to reflection, or anything you want to share with us.
Absolutely. So there's a couple things. Number one, don't be afraid to make a mistake. That's something that I wish I learned a lot sooner, because it would have saved me a lot of heartache, a lot of just overthinking, just a lot of stalling. It's okay to make a mistake. It's going to happen. It's fine. You will be okay. You will be able to rebuild from it. It'll be fine. Give yourself the ability to fail. Just don't stay in that failure. The other thing that I really wish I had absorbed, because I've been told it, but I wish I had absorbed sooner, is that life is a thing to be experienced. It's something that you have to go do. It is not something that's going to come to you. It's not something that's just going to fall in your lap. You have to go do it. And even if it's not perfect, even if you want, let's say you want to have a business, right? Do it. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be, this perfectly laid thing. It can be imperfect. It's fine. It's yours. Do it. Have fun. Learn something. Experience something. Even if it's, okay, I don't want to do this again going forward. You've learned something. And that can help you avoid a pitfall later, because you know what to look for. Just don't be afraid to do that. And you will be surprised at the things that you learn, and the experiences and the beautiful things that you get to have when you just kind of let go of the reins a little bit and just let things happen and just roll with them as they go.
Yeah, live that life.
Absolutely.
Well, hey, Cynthia, I really appreciate you spending some time chatting with us today and catching up. I want to wish you the best of luck starting on Monday with your new adventure. Hopefully we will be able to chat again sometime in the future, and enjoy Seattle, Washington.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Great. Well, thank you everybody for watching Hometown Heroes here on Pack 14. I'm your host, Andy Kitzrow. We'll see you next time.
Bye, guys.
If you'd like to nominate someone to be featured here on Hometown Heroes, please contact George Whitehead at giwhitehead@salisbury.edu or call 410-749-1480.
You too can be a hometown hero on Pack 14.